Hi there, how's it going? Welcome back to the third video in this introductory series on Create Instant Change, a system for psychoactively and hypnotically facilitating change in your fellow human beings. Now, I said in the last video that we would be exploring an idea called the essence of change process, or also I sometimes call it the difference that makes the difference process, and you'll understand why when we unpack it. I also said we're going to be covering the clean future pace, which is a way of future pacing, a way of spiraling the change out into a person's future so it generalizes out into their future, making an ongoing difference for them. We're going to cover these two ideas, but before we do, I'd like to share a little bonus with you. I spoke in the first two videos about the concept of micro change work, about creating a small change that we leverage out into a big change. We're going to cover this leveraging out here on this video, but there are many ways to create this small change, many ways within the Create Instant Change system. I'd like to share with you a very simple method which is based on hypnotic procedures, specifically hypnosis without trance procedures. And we're working with the tendency for human beings to understand things via metaphor and symbology in this particular clip. Let's have a look at it. It's called Letting Go, an Ideodynamic Metaphor. As you just hold that up and just look at the bottom of that coin, know everything that you need to know in this moment about that thing, that if you could just let go of it, it would make a difference for you. Now, you don't need to know everything just as much as your inner mind allows you to know now, but as you look at that coin, I'd like for you to just allow a connection to take place. So it's everything that you know about that thing that will be useful to let go just flows through you and through your arm and all the way into that coin, becoming concentrated, solidifying in that coin. As you look at that coin, everything about that which would be useful to let go concentrates into that coin. And just as soon as that's fully connected, fully flown into that coin, and you can experience that connection, so as that coin becomes that thing that you want to let go of, go ahead and just try and let go of that now. What happens when you try and let go of that now? Just try and let go of that now.
It feels very heavy, but insistent on sticking.
Very heavy.
It feels very heavy. The coin actually feels very heavy.
Very heavy, but insistent on sticking. Very heavy, but insistent on sticking. Just going to borrow your hand, borrow your arm. Just notice that connection continuing now. That's as your elbow softens, relaxes down. And you can just let that start to travel towards your face now. Only as quickly as your inner mind is ready to make some changes and adjustments that will enable you to release that coin so that hand can just start to move towards your face. And you can close your eyes if you wish. That's right. That's right. That's right. So that hand can continue to travel in towards your face. Only as quickly as your inner mind is ready to make some changes. Ooh, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. Now notice that as soon as your hand touches your face, you'll feel fully alert, fully refreshed, 100%, bam, back into regular, everyday. Okay, so that's a very simple hypnotic piece that gets change. The question is, when we get change, what do we do with that change? Well, this is where the essence of change process comes in, or the difference that makes the difference set, and clean future pacing. In a moment, I'm going to hand you over to me. About a year ago, I'm going to travel back in time. You're going to see me in a bit more of a casual state, a bit more of a casual setting, and I'm going to explain exactly how the difference that makes the difference set works along with the clean future pace, and also share an idea about how you can seed post-hypnotically the concept for ongoing change with your client. Then we're going to come back to me now. I will give you a little bit more structure around how it works, an underpinning that will help you get that fully embedded into your mind. And I think it will be useful for me to close the story that we began in the first video as well. If you remember, I was talking about working with a client who had the crush. What I didn't say is what happened after we'd introduced the small change, how we then leveraged it out and how that fed forward into the future. So we're going to finish off that story in this video as well. Okay, so to begin with, let me hand you over to me, circa about 2012, summer 2012. Here I am explaining the essence of change process and the clean future pace. I sometimes call these the essence of change questions, and the reason I call them the essence of change questions is because they are about taking a difference that has happened, a shift that somebody may have made during a conversation, during an interaction, and expanding it out and maturing it out and growing it out. And you can follow the process on by kind of future pacing it, by generalizing it into different situations in their future. That's an additional little bit of the process, but I'll give you the three, the two basic questions that fill it out. Okay, so this is how it works. Imagine you've had a coaching conversation with somebody, or you've done a change work process with somebody. Once you've completed it, you ask one of two questions, and it depends on what you've just done as to what question you ask. If you've just had a kind of a coaching conversation, the question to ask is, what do you know now that you didn't know before? Okay, that's the question. What do you know now that you didn't know before? If you've just been working with a more psychoactive process, a sort of change work process, maybe a formal NLP process or a hypnosis process, I would recommend the question, what do you notice now that's different from before? So those are the two forms of the question. If it's more cerebral and conversational, what do you know now that you didn't know before? If it's been more psychoactive, what do you notice now that's different from before? Okay. Now, whatever the answer to the question is, you feed it back in. You feed it back in. And let me give you an example. If you say, what do you know now that you didn't know before? And the client or the person that you're working with or the person you're having a conversation with says, well, you know, I know that the problem just isn't as big as I thought it was. Let's imagine they say that. What you do is you feed that back to them. And you know now that the problem isn't as big as you thought it was. And they're going to go, mm-hmm. And when the problem isn't as big as you thought it was, and you know that now, this is hypnotic language, and you know that now, what difference does knowing that make? Now there's the second kind of big question. What difference does knowing that make? Now if you think about the structure of this, what it is, it's based on the NLP structure, the difference that makes the difference, or that kind of NLP slogan. Most people take that as a sort of slogan and nothing more. I look at it as a structure. We want to get difference, then ask what the difference makes. So what do you know now that you didn't know before gets the difference, or what do you notice now that's different from before gets the difference. They give you the difference, you feed the difference back, emphasizing the positive qualities of it, and you ask, and when you know that, and when you notice that, depending on the original first question, what difference does knowing that, or what difference does noticing that make? Now we're on to the difference that the difference makes. And they're going to feed you back more information. So let's say the person has said, I know that it's not as big a problem as I thought, and you know that it's not as big a problem as you thought. And when you know that, and you know that now, what difference does knowing that make? Well, I don't know. It just seems like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm able to just go and do it. Let's imagine they say that. I feel like I'm just able to go and do it. And you feed that back, and you're just able to just go and do it. And to just go and do it. And when you're able to just go and do it, what difference does that make? So you see, you're asking the what difference does that make question again. Theoretically, you can ask this infinitely. And what you're doing with every iteration is you're unpacking and you're modeling out the difference further and further and further. If you know clean language, if you're familiar with clean space, you'll recognize it as being similar to the end of the clean space process. And if you know clean language, when the client's giving you the information about difference, you can use other clean language modeling questions to expand that out, and that's a very useful thing to do. What you're basically doing is you're taking a small change and growing it in significance, by shining their torch of consciousness on it and modeling stuff out and mapping it out more. It kind of matures the change, to use another David Grove term. Now, just to add something onto the end of this, if you're familiar with the NLP concept of future pacing, as you map these differences out and you get all this information out, you can kind of feed it back in, and then you can ask another question, which is there a time or a place coming up in the future where a difference like that will be useful to you? And that's the question. And the client will identify some time or some place. Maybe they'll say, yeah, I'm giving a big presentation on Thursday and it will be really, really useful at that time. And I'll feed that back, and a big presentation on Thursday. And when you think about that now, what difference do you notice? Now, what I'm doing with that question is I'm facilitating them taking their consciousness, their mind, their creative faculty into the future and starting to apply all the stuff we've just mapped out into the future. And I'll, expand that out. And I may ask if there are other times or other places. And this is a form of future pacing, but it's what I call a clean future pace, because I'm not telling them any way that their future is going to be. It's mapping out difference and then asking questions that lead them to apply that difference to their future in imagination with their creative faculty. Now, when I've closed this process off, I will tend to I would tend to finish up by saying, I'd really, really like to know about your experience of what it is that you get the opportunity to notice that's different in those situations. So I'm asking that, I'm saying that, making that statement. I'd like to hear your story, what you had the opportunity to notice that was different. And in a way, you could call this a post-hypnotic suggestion, if you like, a conversational post-hypnotic suggestion. It's a direction for them to pay attention and notice difference again in the future, in the situation that they've just been talking about, and to report the difference back to me. So the whole thing, this is why it's the difference that makes the difference, and it keys in with that idea of the essence of change being difference. The whole thing is all about orientating to difference and then mapping, modeling that difference out, and then orientating to the difference that makes, and it's difference, difference, difference all the way, taking difference into the future, and then inviting them to notice difference in the future. Okay, so that's the sort of package, the pattern. You can bolt it onto the end of any coaching conversation, you can bolt it onto the end of any change work process, and it really adds value. I know I've gone through it very, very quickly there, and in a way there are lots of subtleties and nuances that you could look at within that as well. But that as a package is a great package. Just to say, just because that boxed package is designed, so to speak, to be put on the end of a coaching conversation or put on the end of a change work process, doesn't mean that you can't have the principles of that in mind all the time, all the way through the process. That idea of orientating to difference. Here's an example. Now, I never do anything like a fast phobia cure, and I probably never would. But if I were going to, I might set up the first stage of the thing where you have the person with their eyes closed, imagining they're in a cinema, looking up at the screen and seeing a still frame that's at the beginning of the movie they're going to run, of the problem, of the traumatic situation. Now, most of the time when people facilitate a process like that, they invite the person to go there, they invite the person to look up at the screen, then they move to the next stage. They don't stop. They don't stop to check in what's going on with the client. If I were to do that, at that stage I'd be tempted to say, and as you look up at the screen and as you see that there now, how is that different? How is that different? So I'm asking a difference question. The difference question, how is that different? You can ask at any point during a change work process when you've made a shift or made a change, and it shines their torch of consciousness, shines their torch of awareness onto the difference, and that way that difference gets to feed back into the system and grow and expand. So it's facilitating the utilization of feedback, the attention to feedback and the utilization of feedback. This is really, really powerful for growing and driving change.
If you'd already watched the second video, you would have seen me doing some of that at the end of the head, heart and gut process. So I've unpacked and explained it a little bit more now. I'd like to share with you an underpinning structure that'll help you to nail it down. So we've talked about the difference and the difference that difference makes and how we unpack that with questions and then how we clean future pace. If you like, you can think about the structure of this as what, so what, and now what. So if we look at this diagram, if we look at the structure on this diagram, we can see that what is the difference. And we have those two questions. What do you know now that you didn't know before? Or what do you notice now that is different? So there's what, there's the first what, and that gets the difference. Next, we move round to so what. You know, what is the difference that difference makes? So what? What does it matter? And the questions we're going to be asking there are, and when you know that, whatever the difference is, what difference does knowing that make? Shining the torch of consciousness in on difference, completing that feedback circuit. Or we could ask, as you notice that, what difference does that make? Having that now. So there's the difference, and we're unpacking that. And as I mentioned in the clip of me a year ago, we can ask that question several times over. Whatever they give us, we can feed back and say, and what difference does that make? After we've unpacked that and modelled that out a bit, we move on to the now what, which is the clean future pace. So we're asking the question or making the statement, leading them hypnotically with the words, and is there a time or a place coming up over the next few days and weeks where you'll have an opportunity to explore with that difference and notice what it is that you notice? And as you think about that now, what could be different for you in that situation? Now, I also mentioned a sort of post-hypnotic idea where you're seeding this idea about looking for and paying attention to difference and noticing what it is that you notice. I'll often use the way of phrasing it with clients. And is there a time or a place coming up here where you will have the opportunity to notice the difference? This opportunity idea is really, really important. And let me give you an example of how this works. Sometimes when you make a change, it isn't a perfect change. It's less than perfect. Now, if you set up the conditions within change work where you absolutely have to get a perfect result, or anything less than that is a complete failure. It's what I call the promise the world trap in change work. And I've talked about this elsewhere, and I talk about this in the program. If you set this up, this anything less than pattern and this promise the world trap, you can have a complete failure. What I want to do is I want to set up the idea of possibility and difference and opportunity to notice difference. And I seed this kind of conversationally at the end of the session. Now, if you take the example of the guy that I worked with over the crush, I did the work with him, I unpacked it at the end, I did the whole difference that makes the difference thing, the essence of change process, and got it really juiced up in the moment, really zinging for him in the moment, and then sent him off on his merry journey back into life. Now, I followed up with him a week later. This was a one-off session I was doing with him. So I followed up with him a week later because I want to know what's going on and how well the work is working. And I contacted him and I said, so, you know, what's been going on for you? And he said to me, you know, it was really good for a couple of days. And then I saw her. And it all came rushing back. Now, that on the surface of it sounds like a failure. And if you're playing the all or nothing game, if you've done the promise the world trap, if you've made the promise the world trap mistake, then that's pretty catastrophic to get that kind of thing coming back. It's like, oh, it hasn't worked, it only worked for 2 days. But because of the frames that have been seeded ahead of time and the ideas that have been seeded ahead of time, I could simply roll with that and riff with it and say, excellent. And what is it that you had the opportunity to notice this time? And he stopped and reflected and said, well, I guess I realised that I've been letting her do this to me, he said. Now, this is a piece of gold. This is difference. And then I can drop back into the difference that makes the difference process straight off the bat. And I say, and you realise you've been letting her do this to you. And when you realise that, what difference does realising that make? And he stopped and thought and reflected and said, well, I guess it's time for me to stop. Which I feed back, and it's time for you to stop. And can you stop? Yeah, I can. So, think about that as a difference. He's buying into the fact that he can stop. That's come from him, not from me. I just shone his torch of consciousness in a particular direction and had seeded some ideas about opportunities to look for difference. He's fed the actual difference back to me. I fed it back to him, playing with the feedback system, and then we've drawn it out and we've got a commitment for difference that comes from him. This is a huge and powerful thing. When the client generates the change from within and commits to that change, you'll find it a lot more profound, a lot more long-lasting than when you impose your own structured change on the client from the outside. So this is how this works. I hope that you're beginning to get a sense of the elegance of this system and of the flexibility that it gives you as a practitioner, the maneuverability to be able to go with whatever happens, whatever comes up for the client. I've often used the expression getting change to happen whatever happens. It doesn't matter. You go for a result, you go for a small change, you leverage it out. Maybe it's less than perfect. It's almost always less than perfect. But when you've put the structure in place, it doesn't matter because you work with what there is and you just generalize it back out again. You just leverage it back out again and keep feeding it forward. This is the way that Create Instant Change works. There are many choices within the protocol, within the format for what you do, for how you get those initial changes. We looked at one earlier on in this video, which was the letting go, the ideodynamic metaphor. I'm a big fan of ideodynamic work, that way of working hypnotically. So to finish up with this series, I'm going to leave you with another clip of me making a small change using what I call the ideodynamic lever. Now, all of this stuff is shared in the audio program that we've got coming up, the audio and transcript program, Create Instant Change. This is based off earlier in the year. Nathan Thomas of Keys to the Mind persuaded me, lured me out into doing a series of 5 webinars, extensive webinars, where we unpack the Create Instant Change system in detail, along with all the tools that you can use within the system. Now, there are only 17 people at the time permitted on those webinars. We kept them super tight, super focused, but we did record them and we have edited them up. And we have all of the material, the full Create Instant Change system, along with extensive support notes and a full transcript of all 5 webinars. Across the webinars, I'm sharing all the details, all the subtleties and all the tools that you can bring to bear within this format to get change happening whenever, wherever and with whoever you need to get change happening with. So next Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8 p.m. GMT or 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can get your hands on the complete audio recordings of these webinars, plus those notes, plus those transcripts. And the way Nathan's arranged this is there's $100 off this until March the 29th only. So this is an early bird special, which is specifically for people who are loyal subscribers to either Keys to the Mind or Hypnosis Without Trance. This expires next Friday. So keep your eyes peeled for this if you want to get hold of this material, because the next email will be about what needs to happen for you to get that. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed these videos. I hope you've got a good sense, at least a flavour for Create Instant Change and how it works. Let me leave you with another clip. This is the ideodynamic lever, one of my favourite methods for getting a piece of micro change to happen before leveraging out into big change. This is the ideodynamic lever. Enjoy the clip, take care of yourself, and I'll see you all soon. Is there an emotional feeling that you're familiar with in life that you would like to reduce? You don't have to say what it is. You can keep it on 100% to yourself. When you think about that now, how familiar is that feeling?
Reasonably, yeah.
Reasonably.
I think about it every day anyway.
Okay, so you think about it every day, it's reasonably familiar. And when you think about it now, and it's reasonably familiar, how strong is that when you think about that now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being?
I could say, if I really think about it, 8.
8. Okay, 8. So if 10 were up here and 0 where your hand is, whereabouts would an 8 be? Just notice that feeling and put your hand where that will be for the 8. Okay. Now, is that right? Is that about an 8?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can be aware of that. You can notice your hand and notice that feeling at an 8. And is that right? It's about an 8, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So how is that?
Oh, no, I don't think
No. Okay, so just let that start to drift down. That's it. Just as quickly as it needs to, and no quicker, so slowly. And you can just close your eyes and notice, okay, that's interesting. And just notice that And what does that know?
It's silly.
It's silly.
Mm.
And what difference does knowing that make?
It's more fun. Life's more fun.
Life's more fun. Life's more fun. And notice that. And allow that to continue to a wonderful point of conclusion. That's right. And just notice what you notice now. And you can open your eyes just as soon as you are aware of the difference, or of a difference.